The morning had started badly for Olivia Diaz, and it was only getting worse. As she hurried through the crowded terminal of O'Hare International Airport, she could feel sweat forming at her temples, despite the chilly air conditioning. Skywave Airlines Flight 2187 to San Francisco was already running 90 minutes behind schedule, and as the lead flight attendant, Olivia knew she'd bear the brunt of passenger frustrations. Final boarding call for Skywave Airlines, Flight 2187 to San Francisco. The announcement echoed through the terminal as Olivia reached the gate, adjusting her navy blue uniform and quickly checking her appearance in her phone's camera. 15 years as a flight attendant had taught Olivia how to mask exhaustion with a professional smile. At 42, she took pride in her work despite the increasing challenges. The airline industry had changed dramatically since she'd started. Fewer staff, more passengers, and steadily declining working conditions. Still, she loved flying and being the person who could turn someone's bad travel day around. Today, though, her legendary patience was being tested. The flight delay had been caused by mechanical issues that took forever to resolve. The ground crew seemed understaffed, and now they were rushing to board a plane full of irritated travelers who had been waiting for hours. "I'm so sorry for the delay," Olivia repeated for what felt like the 100th time, as passengers filed past her into the aircraft. Most barely acknowledged her, some mumbled responses, and a few made sure she knew exactly how inconvenienced they were. "This is completely unacceptable," snapped a woman in an expensive business suit, waving her boarding pass in Olivia's face. "I'm going to miss my connecting flight, and I have a crucial meeting tomorrow morning." "I understand, ma'am," Olivia replied with practiced calm. "Our ground staff can help rebook your connection once we land. I'll make sure to bring you that information during the flight." The woman huffed and moved on. Olivia took a quick breath before greeting the next passenger. By the time the main cabin had boarded, Olivia was already exhausted. Her co-worker Raj, a newer flight attendant in his late 20s, gave her a sympathetic look. "Rough crowd today," he whispered as they prepared for the final boarding call. "Tell me about it," Olivia sighed. "And we still have the red-eye return flight tonight." Just as they were about to close the aircraft door, a commotion at the gate caught their attention. A man was rushing toward them, slightly out of breath. "Wait, please," he called, holding up his boarding pass. Olivia glanced at her watch. They were already so delayed that the airline would face hefty fines if they didn't take off soon. But company policy was clear. If the passenger made it to the gate before the door closed, they had to let them board. "Final passenger coming through," the gate agent announced, scanning the man's boarding pass and waving him through. The late arrival stepped onto the plane, and Olivia immediately sized him up, a habit developed over years of quickly assessing passengers. He was tall, probably in his late 40s, with close-cropped salt-and-pepper hair and warm brown skin. Unlike most first-class passengers, he was dressed casually in dark jeans, a simple gray t-shirt, and an unbranded navy blazer. No flashy watch or designer luggage, just a worn leather messenger bag slung across his shoulder. The only hint of luxury was a pair of expensive-looking glasses. "Good afternoon, sir," Olivia greeted him, summoning her customer service voice despite her fatigue. "You're in first class, seat 2A. That's just down the aisle on your right." The man nodded with a brief, tired smile. "Thanks. Sorry for being late." As he moved down the narrow aisle, Olivia turned to secure the door and complete the pre-flight checklist. The cabin was hot and stuffy after sitting on the tarmac for so long, and passengers were already complaining about the temperature. The flight deck had informed her that the auxiliary power unit was running below capacity, which meant the air conditioning wouldn't be fully functional until the main engine started. "Raj, can you distribute some water to the main cabin while I check on first class?" Olivia asked, grabbing a stack of cups. "On it," Raj replied, already moving toward the galley. Olivia made her way to first class, where the late arrival was attempting to store his bag in the overhead compartment. The bin was already crowded with oversized carry-ons that should have been checked. Another common problem is airlines charged more for checked baggage. "Let me help you with that," she offered, reaching for his bag. "I've got it, thanks," he insisted. Giving the bag a final push at that exact moment, the captain made an announcement over the intercom, causing several passengers to shift in their seats. The plane, still parked at the gate, suddenly jerked slightly, likely from ground equipment being moved outside. The combination of movements caused the man to lose his balance. He stumbled backward, his elbow connecting solidly with Olivia's shoulder, sending a sharp pain down her arm. The impact knocked her against the partition wall, and the cups she was holding clattered to the floor. It wasn't a devastating blow, but it was the last straw on Olivia's already terrible day. Before she could stop herself, the professional mask slipped. "Sir," she snapped loudly, her voice cutting through the cabin noise. "You need to be more careful." The first-class cabin went silent. The man turned to face her, surprise evident in his expression. "I'm so sorry," he said quickly. "It was an accident. Are you okay?" Olivia felt a flash of embarrassment at her outburst, but pride kept her from backing down completely. "Just please take your seat. We're already significantly delayed." The man looked at her for a long moment, then nodded and sat down without another word. Olivia could feel the eyes of the other first-class passengers on her as she bent to pick up the scattered cups, her cheeks burning. Raj appeared at her side, helping to clean up the mess. "You all right?" he whispered. "Fine," she muttered, though her shoulder throbbed. "Let's just get this flight in the air." The next hour passed in a blur of safety demonstrations, drink service, and managing passenger requests. Olivia avoided the man in 2A, asking Raj to handle his section of first class. She felt slightly guilty about her reaction. Passengers accidentally bumped into crew members all the time in the confined space of an aircraft, but her pride wouldn't let her apologize just yet. As the flight reached cruising altitude, Olivia took a moment in the galley to collect herself. She rolled her shoulder, wincing slightly at the tenderness. It wasn't serious, but it would likely bruise. "The guy in 2A asked if you were okay," Raj said, joining her in the galley. "He seemed genuinely concerned." Olivia sighed. "I overreacted. It's just been one of those days, you know? We all have them," Raj assured her. "Maybe check on him during the next service? He seems like a decent guy." She nodded, knowing Raj was right. No matter how bad her day was, professionalism came first. When meal service began, Olivia steeled herself and approached 2A. The man was working on a laptop, his fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. As she approached with the meal tray, he closed the computer and gave her a small, cautious smile. "I wanted to apologize for earlier," Olivia said quietly. "It's been a challenging day, but that's no excuse for my reaction." "No need," he replied, his voice warm and lacking any hint of condescension. "I should have been more careful in that tight space. Is your shoulder okay?" Surprised by his genuine concern, Olivia felt her defensiveness melt away. "It's fine, thank you for asking. Would you like the chicken or pasta today?" "Pasta, please," he said. "And maybe some sparkling water if you have it." As she set down his meal, Olivia noticed the document on his screen before he closed it, something with Skywave Airlines logo prominently displayed. For a moment, she wondered if he might be from corporate, but then dismissed the thought. Corporate types always made sure the flight crew knew exactly who they were and what their status was. "Enjoy your meal," she said, moving on to the next passenger. For the remainder of the flight, the man was a model passenger, polite, undemanding, and cleaning up after himself before Olivia could collect his tray. When they landed in San Francisco, he waited until most passengers had deplaned before gathering his things. As he passed Olivia at the door, he paused. "I hope the rest of your day improves," he said sincerely. "Thank you," she replied, "and safe travels." Olivia watched as he walked up the jetway, disappearing into the bustling terminal. She had no idea that their paths would cross again very soon, or that the man she had snapped at was Elijah Wright, the brilliant entrepreneur who had quietly purchased Skywave Airlines just 3 weeks earlier. For now, though, all Olivia knew was that she had 5 hours to rest before her return flight to Chicago. She stretched her sore shoulder and sighed. Just another day in the friendly skies. 3 days later, Olivia slumped into her tiny apartment in Chicago's Rogers Park neighborhood, dropping her flight bag by the door. After a grueling week of cross-country flights, she had finally secured 2 days off. All she wanted was a hot bath, delivery food, and maybe a movie before sleeping for 12 straight hours. She kicked off her sensible black shoes and massaged her aching feet. 15 years of standing in airplane aisles had left her with chronic pain that no amount of compression socks or orthotic inserts could fully relieve. Still, she loved her job most days anyway. As she scrolled through food delivery options on her phone, it buzzed with an incoming call. The screen displayed Skywave scheduling. Olivia groaned. Off-duty calls from scheduling typically meant one thing. They wanted her to cover an additional shift. For a moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail. But years of company loyalty won out, and she answered with her professional voice. "This is Olivia." "Hello, Ms. Diaz. This is Gregory from Human Resources," said an unfamiliar male voice. "Not scheduling after all. I hope I'm not disturbing you." Olivia sat up straighter, a knot forming in her stomach. HR calls rarely brought good news. "Not at all," she lied. "How can I help you?" "We need you to come in for a meeting tomorrow at corporate headquarters." "Would 10 a.m. work for you?" The knot in her stomach tightened. "May I ask what this is regarding?" There was a slight pause. "I'm afraid I don't have those details." The request came directly from upper management. Upper management? In 15 years, Olivia had never been called to corporate headquarters. Something was very wrong. "Yes, 10 a.m. is fine," she heard herself say. After hanging up, Olivia paced her small living room. Her mind raced through recent flights, searching for anything that might have prompted this summons. The incident with the man in first class flashed in her memory. Had he filed a complaint? It seemed unlikely. The interaction hadn't been that serious, and he'd seemed understanding by the end of the flight. Sleep eluded her that night. By morning, she'd convinced herself she was about to be fired for her unprofessional outburst. After 15 years of exemplary service, one bad day might cost her everything. Skywave's corporate headquarters occupied several floors of a gleaming downtown skyscraper. Olivia had flown over it countless times on approach to O'Hare but had never been inside. She felt distinctly out of place in the marble-floored lobby, surrounded by people in expensive business attire. She had worn her best non-uniform outfit, black pants, a blue blouse, and a blazer, but still felt underdressed. "Olivia Diaz for a 10 a.m. meeting," she told the receptionist, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes, Ms. Diaz, please take the elevator to the 28th floor. Someone will meet you there." The 28th floor. Executive territory. Definitely not good. When the elevator doors opened, a young woman with a tablet greeted her. "Ms. Diaz?" "I'm Layla, Mr. Richardson's assistant." "Please follow me." "Mr. Richardson?" Olivia asked, struggling to keep up with Layla's brisk pace. "Thomas Richardson, VP of Operations," Layla explained, leading her down a corridor lined with glass-walled offices. They stopped outside a conference room where several people were already seated around a large table. Olivia recognized Thomas Richardson from company communications. Next to him sat Patricia Winters, the head of flight services, Olivia's department. Two other executives she didn't recognize completed the group, and then her eyes fell on the fifth person in the room. The man from the plane, the one she had snapped at. He was dressed more formally today in a tailored gray suit that fit his tall frame perfectly. But there was no mistaking him. Layla showed Olivia to an empty chair directly across from him, then quietly left the room. "Thank you for coming in." "Ms. Diaz," Richardson began, his tone impossible to read. "I believe you've already met Mr. Wright." The man, Mr. Wright, gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. Yes, we met briefly on a flight to San Francisco recently," Olivia managed to say, her mouth suddenly dry. "Elijah Wright," Richardson continued, "has recently acquired Skywave Airlines. He's our new owner." The room seemed to tilt. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. She had yelled at the owner of the airline, the actual owner, not some mid-level executive or frequent flyer, but the man who signed everyone's paychecks. "It's good to see you again." "Ms. Diaz," Elijah Wright said, his deep voice calm and measured. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs. This was worse than she had imagined. She wasn't being fired by HR. She was being fired by the owner himself, with an audience of executives to witness her humiliation. "Before we begin," Richardson said, sliding a document across the table, "we'll need you to sign this confidentiality agreement. Everything discussed in this meeting is strictly proprietary." Moving on autopilot, Olivia signed the paper. She just wanted this to be over quickly. "Mr. Wright has been conducting a comprehensive review of our operations," Richardson explained. "As part of that process, he's been traveling on our flights incognito to experience our service firsthand." Patricia Winters leaned forward. "He was quite impressed with your handling of a difficult situation on Monday's flight to San Francisco, despite the misunderstanding during boarding. Impressed?" Olivia blinked in confusion. Elijah Wright spoke up. Ms. Diaz, I've been flying on different airlines for the past month, observing how they operate. Your flight was particularly challenging. Delayed, full of frustrated passengers, inadequate climate control. Yet you managed it all with remarkable professionalism. Olivia found her voice. Except when I yelled at you, sir. To her surprise, Wright smiled. That moment of frustration was the most honest interaction I've had with any employee. Everyone else has been too busy trying to impress me to be candid. Richardson cleared his throat. Mr. Wright believes that frontline employees, like yourself, have valuable insights about our operations that aren't making their way up to management. The view from this boardroom is very different from the view from the cabin, Wright added. I'm trying to bridge that gap. Olivia's mind raced to catch up. This didn't sound like a termination meeting. We've reviewed your file, Ms. Diaz, Patricia said. 15 years with Skywave, consistently positive performance reviews, numerous passenger commendations. You're exactly the kind of experienced voice we need to hear from. Wright leaned forward, his gaze direct but not unkind. I'd like to offer you a temporary assignment. 6 weeks with the executive team, providing your perspective on our operational challenges and how they affect both crew and passengers. Olivia stared at him, certain she had misheard. You want me to work with the executive team? As what, exactly? As a consultant, Wright replied. Your regular pay plus a stipend and guaranteed return to your current position afterward if you choose. This is highly unusual, one of the unnamed executives muttered. Not quite under his breath, Wright ignored him. The airline industry has a fundamental disconnect. The people making decisions rarely experience the consequences of those decisions. I'm trying to fix that. Olivia looked around the table, still expecting someone to tell her this was all an elaborate joke. The executives looked back with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed skepticism. Why me? She finally asked. Because you weren't afraid to call me out when I messed up, Wright said simply. That tells me you care more about doing the right thing than following hierarchy. That's rare, and it's exactly what I need right now. Olivia took a deep breath, trying to process this bizarre turn of events. Yesterday, she was a flight attendant worried about losing her job. Today, she was being offered a position advising the executive team. This is unexpected, she said carefully. I would need some time to think about it. Of course, Wright nodded. But I should mention that Skywave is at a crossroads. The airline isn't performing well financially. That's why I purchased it. I believe it can be turned around. But only with significant changes. Changes that typically begin with layoffs, Olivia said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Wright held her gaze. I prefer to fix problems rather than just cut costs. But to do that, I need honest input from people who understand the real challenges, not just spreadsheet projections. Patricia slid another document across the table. This outlines the proposed assignment, including compensation. Take the weekend to consider it. We'd like your answer by Monday. As the meeting concluded, the executives filed out, leaving Olivia alone with Elijah Wright. For what it's worth, he said quietly, your reaction on the plane was completely justified. I was careless and you were having a terrible day. Sometimes the most valuable feedback comes when the filters are off. Olivia studied his face, searching for insincerity but finding none. Sir, I'm just a flight attendant. I don't know anything about corporate strategy or financial turnarounds. Wright smiled. But you know everything about what works and what doesn't at 35,000 feet. That's expertise we desperately need. He headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Ms. Diaz, if you take this assignment, please call me Elijah. Sir makes me feel like my father. As Olivia rode the elevator down to the lobby, her mind spun with possibilities and doubts. The proposal clutched in her hand represented either the opportunity of a lifetime or the most elaborate setup for failure she'd ever encountered. Either way, her life had just taken an unexpected course change, all because she'd had the bad luck, or maybe the good fortune, to snap at a billionaire. Olivia stared at her tiny apartment kitchen table, now covered with notes, printed articles, and her laptop. The weekend had flown by as she researched everything she could find about Elijah Wright and Skywave's financial situation. Wright had made his fortune in tech, creating software that helped companies optimize their supply chains. He'd sold that company 5 years ago and started investing in struggling businesses. According to the articles she'd found, He had a reputation for turning companies around by fixing their operational problems rather than just cutting costs. But the airline industry was notoriously difficult. What made him think he could succeed where so many others had failed? Her phone buzzed with a text from Raj. "Have you decided yet?" Olivia had called him right after the meeting, needing to tell someone about her bizarre day. As a friend and colleague, Raj understood the airline's problems from the trenches. She typed back, "Still thinking. Pros once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, good money, chance to fix things that drive us crazy. Cons way outside my comfort zone. Executives who don't want me there. Probably setting myself up for failure." Raj responded almost immediately. "When you put it that way, sounds like you've already decided." "You're just scared," Olivia sighed. He wasn't wrong. After 15 years of following procedures and protocols, the idea of suddenly helping shape them was terrifying. But also exhilarating. She picked up the assignment outline again. 6 weeks, temporary. She could always go back to her regular job afterward. What did she have to lose? Monday morning found her back at corporate headquarters, this time on the 30th floor. Executive territory. She'd spent an hour that morning deciding what to wear, finally settling on a charcoal gray pantsuit she'd bought years ago for her grandmother's funeral. It was the most formal outfit she owned. Layla greeted her with a smile. "Mr. Wright is waiting for you. Let me show you to your office." "My office?" Olivia echoed, surprised. "Just through here." Layla led her to a small but bright corner office with windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. It wasn't large or fancy like the executive suites she'd glimpsed, but it had a desk, computer, and even a small sitting area with 2 chairs. "I assumed I'd be in a cubicle somewhere," Olivia admitted. "Mr. Wright insisted you have a proper workspace," Layla explained. "He'll be here in a few minutes to get you started." "Can I get you anything? Coffee?" Before Olivia could answer, Elijah Wright appeared in the doorway. Today he wore dark slacks and a light blue button-down shirt, no tie. Despite his casual appearance, he carried an unmistakable air of authority. "Ms. Diaz, welcome to the team," he said, extending his hand. "I'm glad you accepted the assignment." His handshake was firm but not aggressive, the kind that suggested confidence rather than dominance. "Thank you for the opportunity," Olivia replied, sounding more confident than she felt. "Though I'm still not entirely sure what I'm doing here." Wright smiled. "That makes 2 of us. This is an experiment. But before we dive in, I should probably explain why I bought an airline." He motioned toward the sitting area, and they both took seats. 6 months ago, I had the worst travel experience of my life," he began. 3 canceled flights, lost luggage, customer service lines a mile long, and not a single person who seemed empowered to actually solve problems. It was a perfect storm of everything wrong with air travel. Olivia nodded. She'd witnessed similar meltdowns many times. Most people would just complain and move on, Wright continued. But I started wondering why airlines, with all their resources and technology, create such consistently terrible experiences. So I began researching the industry and decided to buy an airline. Olivia couldn't hide her skepticism. Wright laughed. "I know it sounds crazy, but what I found was an industry trapped in outdated thinking, with companies cutting corners in ways that actually cost them more in the long run. Skywave was in trouble financially, but its core problem isn't lack of demand. It's operational inefficiency and poor customer experience." He leaned forward, his expression growing more serious. "Airlines have spent decades focusing on the wrong metrics. They pack more seats in planes, cut staff to bare minimums, nickel and dime passengers with fees, and then wonder why customers hate flying and employees burn out. That's putting it mildly," Olivia said. "Most days we're just trying to survive our shifts." "Exactly. And that's where you come in. I need someone who lives these problems daily to help me identify what's actually happening on the ground, or in the air, in this case." A knock at the door interrupted them. Thomas Richardson and 2 other executives Olivia recognized from Friday's meeting entered. "I see Ms. Diaz has decided to join us," Richardson said, his tone making it clear he wasn't thrilled about it. "Yes, and we're just discussing her role," Wright replied evenly. "Thomas, could you bring everyone up to speed on this morning's numbers?" Richardson straightened, switching to business mode. "On-time performance is at 76% system-wide, below industry average. We have staffing shortages in Denver and Atlanta. The new baggage system in Los Angeles is experiencing technical issues for the third day in a row. As he spoke, Olivia noticed the other executives checking their phones or staring blankly, as if they'd heard this all before and weren't particularly interested. "And how do these issues affect our passengers?" Wright asked when Richardson finished. The question was met with awkward silence. Finally, one executive offered, "Increased complaints, potential loss of business travelers to competitors." "Ms. Diaz," Wright turned to her. "From your perspective, how do these operational issues impact the actual passenger experience?" All eyes turned to Olivia. Her mouth went dry. This was why she was here, but actually speaking up in a room full of executives was intimidating. "Well," she began hesitantly, "when flights are delayed, passengers miss connections. That means they're stuck in airports, often overnight. They miss important events, weddings, funerals, business meetings. Their vacations get cut short. And we, the flight crew, are the ones who have to face their frustration." She paused, then continued with more confidence. "The baggage system issues in LA. That means passengers arriving after a long flight wait an hour for their luggage. Then some discover it's been lost. They have no clothes for their trip, no medication sometimes. And again, they take it out on the frontline staff because we're the only company representatives they can actually talk to." Wright nodded encouragingly. "And the staffing shortages? That means crews are overworked, which leads to exhaustion and mistakes. It means longer lines at check-in, which makes passengers stressed before they even board. And it means less time for proper aircraft cleaning between flights, which passengers definitely notice." Richardson shifted uncomfortably. "These are industry-wide problems, not unique to Skywave." "That doesn't make them acceptable," Wright countered. "What if we approached these issues differently? Not as inevitable costs of doing business, but as opportunities to distinguish ourselves?" The conversation continued, with Wright repeatedly bringing Olivia into the discussion. Some executives seemed genuinely interested in her perspective, while others, particularly Richardson, clearly resented her presence. After the meeting, Wright walked Olivia back to her office. "That wasn't easy, speaking up in front of the leadership team. You did well." "They think I don't belong here," Olivia said, "and they might be right." "They're used to talking to people exactly like themselves," Wright replied. "That's part of the problem. For the next 6 weeks, I'd like you to attend key meetings, review operations reports, and provide your unfiltered perspective. Specifically, I want you to identify our biggest pain points for crew and passengers and suggest practical improvements." "That's a tall order." "It is. But you have experience they don't. Use it." He paused. "One more thing. Some of the team will try to undermine you. Don't let them. You have direct access to me anytime you need it." As Wright left, Olivia sank into her desk chair, feeling overwhelmed. What had she gotten herself into? Over the next 2 weeks, Olivia threw herself into the assignment. She attended meetings where executives debated cost-cutting measures without considering their impact on service quality. She reviewed efficiency reports that somehow never mentioned passenger satisfaction, and she began compiling her own observations into a document she called "The Real Cost of Cutting Corners." Some of the executives gradually warmed to her, especially when she helped them understand how their decisions played out in real-world scenarios. Others, like Richardson, remained coldly polite but dismissive. One afternoon, Olivia was reviewing flight delay data when Layla appeared at her door. "Mr. Wright would like you to join him for a flight tomorrow," she said, handing Olivia an itinerary. Chicago to Dallas, returning the same day. The next morning, Olivia met Wright at O'Hare. To her surprise, he was dressed casually again, with no hint that he owned the airline they were about to board. "Aren't you worried about being recognized?" she asked as they walked through the terminal. "Most people never look closely at the person next to them," he replied. "Besides, my picture isn't plastered all over the business magazines. I prefer to work quietly." As they boarded, Wright asked Olivia to experience the flight as a passenger while he observed the crew. It felt strange being on the other side, watching her colleagues work while she sat in a first-class seat. During the flight, Wright took notes on a small pad. Occasionally, he would lean over to ask Olivia about standard procedures or why things were done a certain way. On the return flight that evening, they sat side by side again, this time in economy. The flight was fully booked, the seats cramped, and the air stuffy. "This," Wright said quietly as they squeezed into their seats, "is what most people experience when they fly." not the relative comfort of first class. This is the product we're actually selling to 80% of our customers. Olivia watched as he tried to fit his tall frame into the limited space, his knees pressing against the seat in front of him. Now imagine doing a cross-country flight like this, she said, or worse, an international one. By the time they landed back in Chicago, it was nearly midnight. As they walked through the nearly empty terminal, Wright seemed deep in thought. "What did you learn today?" Olivia finally asked. He stopped walking and turned to her. "I learned that we're asking passengers to endure conditions we wouldn't accept in any other industry. And we're asking our crew to somehow make that experience pleasant, while giving them inadequate resources and support." He shook his head. "We have a lot of work to do." As they parted ways at the airport exit, Wright added, "I'm hosting a strategy session next week with the full leadership team. I'd like you to present your findings so far." Olivia felt a flutter of panic. "You want me to present to the entire executive team?" "Yes," Wright replied simply. "It's time they heard some uncomfortable truths about what we're doing wrong and how we might start getting it right." As she took a rideshare home that night, Olivia realized how much had changed in just 2 weeks. She was no longer just observing the company's problems. She was being asked to help solve them, in front of the people who had created them in the first place. The real challenge was just beginning. Olivia stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of the executive floor. She had arrived an hour early for the strategy session, hoping to calm her nerves and review her presentation one last time. Instead, she found herself hiding in the bathroom, fighting waves of doubt. "What am I doing here?" she whispered to her reflection. She had spent the past week preparing a presentation that would essentially tell a room full of highly paid executives that they were doing their jobs wrong. Who was she to do that? Her phone buzzed with a text from Raj. "Knock 'em dead today. Remember, you know things they don't." Olivia took a deep breath. Raj was right. She might not have an MBA or a corner office, but she had 15 years of frontline experience. She knew what passengers needed, what frustrated them, what made their travel experience better. She knew what the crew needed to provide good service. With renewed determination, she straightened her jacket, checked her hair one last time, and headed toward the conference room. The large room was already filling with executives when she arrived. Some nodded politely as she entered. Others barely glanced up from their phones or laptops. Olivia took a seat near the front where her presentation materials were ready. A few minutes later, Elijah Wright entered, and the room quickly settled. Unlike the others in their formal business attire, Wright wore dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Yet somehow he still commanded the room. "Good morning, everyone," he began, scanning the faces around the table. "Today is not about quarterly projections or cost-cutting measures. It's about reimagining what Skywave can be." He paced slowly as he spoke. For too long, airlines have accepted the idea that passenger discomfort and employee burnout are just costs of doing business. I reject that premise. The companies that will thrive in the next decade are those that realize happy employees create happy customers, and happy customers create sustainable profits. Richardson, seated near the end of the table, shifted uncomfortably. "With all due respect, Mr. Wright, this industry operates on razor-thin margins. Customer comfort initiatives sound nice, but they're expensive luxuries." Wright smiled slightly. "Are they? Or is that just the conventional wisdom we've all accepted without questioning?" He gestured toward Olivia. "That's why I've asked Ms. Diaz to share her findings with us today. She's been observing our operations from a unique perspective, someone who knows both what our passengers experience and what our crew deals with daily." All eyes turned to Olivia. The knot in her stomach tightened, but she stood and moved to the front of the room with as much confidence as she could muster. "Thank you, Mr. Wright," she began, her voice steadier than she expected. "For the past 3 weeks, I've been looking at how our operational decisions affect both passenger experience and crew efficiency." She clicked to her first slide, a simple graph showing passenger complaints rising, alongside cost-cutting measures. "We've been focusing on short-term savings that actually cost us more in the long run," she continued. "When we reduce staff at check-in counters to save on labor, passengers wait longer. Some miss their flights, creating rebooking costs and lost revenue. Those who do make their flights board frustrated, creating more work for flight attendants who then have less time for safety checks and service." She clicked through more slides, each illustrating how a cost-saving measure created a cascade of negative effects that ultimately hurt the bottom line. Our new baggage fees were projected to generate $12 million in revenue annually, she noted, pointing to another chart. But they've also increased carry-on luggage by 40%, which slows boarding, causes delays, and creates flight attendant injuries from helping lift heavy bags, leading to workers' comp claims and staffing shortages. As she spoke, Olivia noticed a subtle shift in the room. Some executives were leaning forward, genuinely interested. Others, including Richardson, wore expressions that ranged from skeptical to openly hostile. The fundamental problem, she concluded, is that we've been measuring the wrong things. We track cost per available seat mile, load factors, and fuel efficiency. Those matter, of course. But we don't systematically track passenger satisfaction, crew well-being, or the hidden costs of our efficiency measures. Wright nodded encouragingly. What would you recommend? This was the moment Olivia had been dreading, telling executives how to do their jobs better. But she had come too far to hold back now. First, we need to rethink our scheduling. Current turnaround times are unrealistic, leading to chronic delays. Second, we need to restore staffing to sustainable levels, particularly at major hubs. Third, we should revise our fee structure to encourage behavior that actually improves efficiency, not just generates revenue. She took a deep breath and continued. But most importantly, we need to start seeing crew well-being and passenger satisfaction as core business metrics, not just nice-to-haves. Happy crews create happy passengers, and happy passengers become loyal customers. As she finished and returned to her seat, the room remained silent for a moment. Then Richardson cleared his throat. That was interesting, he said, his tone making it clear he meant the opposite. But I'm not seeing hard data on ROI for these proposals. We're running a business, not a charity. Before Olivia could respond, another executive, Diane Wong from finance, spoke up. Actually, I found the connection between crew burnout and increased costs compelling. We spend millions on recruitment and training due to high turnover. If better working conditions could reduce that by even 20%, the savings would be substantial. And the delay costs are very real, added Michael Chen from operations. When we miss our on-time targets, we pay penalties to airports, create overtime costs, and lose high-value business travelers who choose more reliable competitors. Soon a lively debate was underway, with executives building on or challenging Olivia's points. Wright let the discussion flow, occasionally steering it back to key issues when it veered off course. Finally, he raised a hand to quiet the room. This is exactly the conversation we need to be having. For too long, we've accepted industry practices without questioning their actual value. Ms. Diaz has given us a valuable perspective from the front lines. Richardson was not ready to concede. While this has been an interesting academic exercise, we're facing real financial pressures. Sky Airlines just announced a merger with Global Air. They'll have more routes, more planes, and more pricing power. We need practical solutions, not wishful thinking. A murmur went through the room. The merger news had clearly rattled everyone. Wright remained calm. All the more reason to differentiate ourselves. When two giants merge, they typically struggle with integration for years. Service suffers. That creates an opportunity for a nimble competitor offering a superior experience. With all due respect, Richardson countered, passengers choose airlines based on price and schedule. Not warm cookies and friendly smiles, do they? Wright asked. Or is that just what we tell ourselves to justify cutting corners? Southwest and JetBlue built successful businesses by challenging exactly that assumption. The discussion continued for another hour, growing increasingly heated as executives debated the path forward. Olivia mostly listened, occasionally answering questions about specific passenger or crew pain points. When Wright finally adjourned the meeting, the room quickly emptied, executives hurrying to their next appointments. Olivia gathered her materials, feeling emotionally drained but proud that she had spoken her truth. That took courage, said a voice behind her. She turned to find Diane Wong, the finance executive who had supported some of her points. Thank you, Olivia replied, surprised by the friendly overture. I've been saying similar things for years, but no one listens to the numbers person unless they're talking about cost cutting, Wong admitted. Maybe they'll listen to someone from the front lines. As Wong left, Wright approached, a thoughtful expression on his face. Well done. You've started exactly the conversation this company needs to have. I'm not sure everyone agrees, Olivia said, thinking of Richardson's barely concealed contempt. Change makes people uncomfortable, especially those with the most invested in the status quo, Wright replied. But discomfort is often where growth begins. He walked with her toward the elevator. The merger news complicates things. The board is nervous and some will push for conventional cost-cutting responses. So all of this was for nothing? Olivia couldn't hide her disappointment. Not at all. But we need to move quickly. I'd like you to work with Diane and Michael to develop a specific proposal. Something tangible we can implement within 30 days to demonstrate that a better passenger experience can actually improve our bottom line. The elevator arrived, and Wright stepped back to let her enter. You changed some minds today, Ms. Diaz. That's no small achievement. As the doors closed and she descended to the lobby, Olivia reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. She had gone from serving drinks in the aisle to presenting in the boardroom. She had spoken her truth to people with far more power and status than herself. Whether they would act on her recommendations remained to be seen. But for the first time in years, she felt hopeful about the airline's future and her own. That evening, Olivia met Raj at a small bar near her apartment. After ordering drinks, she filled him in on the day's events. So you're telling me you stood up in front of the entire executive team and basically told them they've been doing everything wrong? Raj asked, eyes wide with disbelief. Pretty much, Olivia admitted, still somewhat surprised at her own boldness. And you still have a job? More than that, Wright wants me to help develop an actual proposal for changes. She took a sip of her beer. But there's a complication. NextSky and Global Air are merging. It's going to put huge pressure on Skywave, Raj whistled. That's a game changer. Together they'll dominate most major routes. Exactly. And some executives, especially Richardson, see it as proof that we need to cut costs even more aggressively to compete. While Wright thinks that it's an opportunity to offer something different. Better service, happier employees, a more humane flying experience. Olivia traced a pattern in the condensation on her glass. The question is whether the board will give him time to prove it can work. And where does that leave you? Olivia considered the question. 3 weeks ago, she had been just a flight attendant worried about keeping her job. Now she was helping shape the company's strategy. I'm not sure, she admitted. But for the first time in years, I feel like I'm making a difference. Like maybe all those frustrating days in the air weren't just about surviving the shift, but were preparing me for something bigger. Raj raised his glass. To something bigger, then? Olivia clinked her glass against his, but a notification on her phone interrupted the moment. It was an email from Wright's assistant, scheduling an urgent meeting for tomorrow morning. The subject line read, Richardson's counterproposal. The battle, it seemed, was just beginning. 6 months later, Olivia stood at the back of the bustling gate area at O'Hare, watching passengers board Skywave's early morning flight to Boston. She wore a navy blue suit now instead of a flight attendant uniform, but she still felt most at home here in the airport, observing the real-world impact of the changes she had helped implement. The past 6 months had been the most challenging and rewarding of her career. What had started as a 6-week temporary assignment had evolved into something permanent and meaningful. The journey hadn't been smooth, but standing here now she could see the results. On-time departure looking good, said a voice beside her. Olivia turned to see Raj, who had recently been promoted to lead flight attendant. Thanks to your crew's efficient boarding, she replied with a smile. And thanks to the new boarding procedures that actually make sense, Raj added. You should see how much smoother it is now that we board from the back, with assigned overhead bin space. Night and day difference. Olivia nodded, remembering the resistance they'd faced when proposing those changes. It seemed so obvious now. Board from the back to avoid congestion. Assign overhead bin space to eliminate the baggage battle. But it had taken weeks of meetings to convince the operations team to try it. How's life in the executive world? Raj asked as they watched the last passengers board. Busy. Challenging. Sometimes I still feel like I don't belong there, Olivia admitted. But it's getting easier. And seeing changes like this actually happen, it makes the battles worth it. Her mind drifted back to that pivotal meeting 6 months ago, when Richardson had presented his counterproposal. She could still picture the tense boardroom, the anxious faces around the table, the moment when everything could have gone in a very different direction. Richardson had arrived prepared for war, armed with a slick presentation titled Competitive Response Strategy. His plan was exactly what Olivia had feared. slash staff by 15%, reduce in-flight service to the bare minimum, increase fees across the board, and cram more seats into every aircraft. This is the only viable path forward given the next Sky merger, he had insisted, showing charts that predicted doom unless drastic cost-cutting measures were taken. We can't afford feel-good initiatives when our very survival is at stake. The board members had looked concerned, several nodding along with Richardson's grim assessment. Even Wright had remained stone-faced during the presentation, giving no hint of his thoughts. When Richardson finished, Wright had simply asked, "Any other perspectives before we discuss?" Olivia had exchanged glances with Diane from finance and Michael from operations, her unlikely allies in developing their own proposal. With a subtle nod from Wright, Diane had taken the floor. "We've prepared an alternative approach," Diane had begun calmly, "one that addresses our competitive challenges without compromising the passenger experience or staff morale." What followed was a presentation they had worked day and night to prepare, a detailed analysis showing how targeted improvements in passenger experience could actually reduce costs while increasing revenue. Michael outlined operational changes like the new boarding procedure, revised flight schedules with more realistic turnaround times, and crew scheduling improvements that reduced overtime and burnout. Olivia had presented their passenger experience initiatives, simplified fee structures that encouraged behavior that made operations more efficient, basic amenities restored to all flights, and a customer service recovery program that turned problems into opportunities for loyalty. "This isn't about luxury," she had explained. "It's about treating passengers like humans, not cargo. When we do that, they choose us over competitors, even if our fares are slightly higher." The debate that followed had been intense. Richardson had dismissed their plan as naive wishful thinking, while others questioned whether such changes could be implemented quickly enough to make a difference. The boardroom had grown quiet when Wright finally spoke. "We face two paths," he had said thoughtfully. "Continue the industry's race to the bottom, cutting costs until the experience is so miserable that we lose customers faster than we can save money. Or chart a different course, one that recognizes the hidden costs of unhappy employees and dissatisfied customers." He had paused, looking around the room. Richardson's approach is the safe choice. It's what every airline does when faced with competition, and that's precisely why it won't give us any competitive advantage. In the end, the board had approved a modified version of their plan as a 3-month trial in select markets. If the results were positive, they would roll it out system-wide. If not, they would revert to Richardson's approach. Those had been the most stressful 3 months of Olivia's life. She had moved from observing problems to being responsible for fixing them. Every setback, every negative comment on social media, every operational hiccup had felt like a personal failure. But gradually, something remarkable had happened. On-time performance improved as flight schedules became more realistic. Crew sick calls decreased as working conditions improved. Customer complaints dropped while compliments rose, and most surprisingly, revenue began to climb. Passengers were choosing Skywave over competitors, even paying slightly more for a significantly better experience. The business travelers Richardson had insisted only cared about schedule and price were actually willing to pay a premium for reliability and humane treatment. After 3 months, the board had not only approved the full rollout but created a new position, Chief Customer Experience Officer, and they had offered it to Olivia. "Hello?" "Earth to Olivia." Raj's voice pulled her back to the present. "The flight's about to push back. On-time departure looking good." "Sorry," Olivia smiled. "Got lost in thought." "Thinking about how far you've come?" Raj asked. "About how far we've all come," she corrected. "Remember how things were just 6 months ago?" Raj nodded. Overworked crews, unhappy passengers, everyone just trying to get through their day. Now there's actually some joy back in flying. He checked his watch. "Speaking of which, I need to get to my next flight. Still coming to the crew appreciation event next week?" "Wouldn't miss it," Olivia assured him. "I might wear a suit now, but I'm still cabin crew at heart." As Raj headed off, Olivia's phone buzzed with a message from Layla. "Mr. Wright would like to see you when you get back to the office." An hour later, Olivia knocked on the door of Wright's office. Unlike most CEOs who position themselves on the highest floor with the best views, Wright had chosen a mid-level office near the departments he worked with most. His door was almost always open, another break from corporate tradition. "Come in, Olivia," he called. He was standing by the window looking out at the Chicago skyline. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, noticing several financial reports spread across his desk. "I did." He turned to face her, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "The quarterly numbers are in." Olivia felt a flutter of anxiety. Despite their initial success, the airline industry was notoriously volatile. A spike in fuel prices, a major weather event, or aggressive moves from competitors could quickly erase their gains. "And?" she asked cautiously. "See for yourself." Wright handed her a report pointing to a highlighted section. Olivia scanned the numbers, her eyes widening. Passenger revenue up 12% year-over-year. Employee turnover down 28%. Net Promoter Score, the measure of customer likelihood to recommend, up by 15 points, the largest increase in the company's history. "This is," she began, "proof that doing the right thing can also be profitable," Wright finished for her. "The board is thrilled. Even Richardson has stopped arguing, though he'll never admit he was wrong." Olivia sank into a chair, the reality of their achievement sinking in. "I can hardly believe it sometimes. That day when I snapped at you on the plane, I was sure my career was over. Instead, it was just beginning." Wright laughed. "The universe works in strange ways. If you hadn't been honest with me that day, if you'd just plastered on a fake smile like most people do, I would never have known what you were capable of." He sat down across from her. "Which brings me to the reason I called you in today. The NextSky merger has created gaps in several markets. Their integration problems are worse than expected, just as we predicted." "I've seen the reports," Olivia nodded. "Massive flight cancellations, lost luggage, customer service meltdowns." "Exactly. We have a unique opportunity to expand while they're struggling. I'm proposing we acquire 20 new aircraft and add routes to 12 cities over the next 18 months. Olivia's heart raced at the scale of the expansion. "That's ambitious." "It is, and the board has concerns about growing too quickly and losing the culture we've worked to build." Wright leaned forward. "That's why I want you to lead the expansion planning team. No one understands better than you how our operational decisions affect both employees and passengers. Me, but I've only been in executive leadership for 6 months. And in that time, you've proven that frontline experience can be more valuable than years of MBA theories." Wright smiled. "Besides, I trust your instincts. You're not afraid to tell me when I'm wrong, which is surprisingly rare in corporate America." Olivia thought about how much her life had changed since that fateful flight. From serving drinks to helping lead a company. From feeling powerless to making real change. "There's one more thing," Wright continued. "I'd like you to share our story at the International Airline Conference next month. How a flight attendant's perspective transformed an airline's approach to business." "I'm not much of a public speaker," Olivia protested. "You faced down a room full of skeptical executives with nothing but your conviction and experience," Wright reminded her. "I think you can handle a few hundred airline industry professionals." As Olivia left Wright's office, she walked past the wall of photographs in the main hallway. A new addition caught her eye, a framed picture of a Skywave crew smiling genuinely alongside happy passengers. Beneath it was a simple caption, "Success begins with service." She remembered something her grandmother used to say, "Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best opportunities." That day on the plane when she had lost her cool with a passenger had seemed like a disaster. Instead, it had been the beginning of something remarkable. Outside the window, a Skywave plane took off, climbing steadily into the clear blue sky. Olivia watched it ascend, thinking about all the people on board, both passengers and crew, having a fundamentally better experience because someone had cared enough to challenge the status quo. 6 months ago, she had been a flight attendant who hit a billionaire. Today, she was a leader helping to transform an industry. Sometimes the universe worked in strange ways indeed.